You can see the title of this piece is from Frank Warren, and he warns that Dubois Joyce could be postponed yet again. It's crazy how many times this fight's been postponed, but it looks like a possibility. Looks like a possibility that it could be postponed again, but let's get into it. Let's get into it. Let's see what he says. Let's see what Frank Warren says. Okay, so Frank Warren, promoter of heavyweight contenders Daniel Dubois and Joe Joyce, caution that their anticipated showdown may be postponed for a third time. Where are we? Third time. Okay, so the fight was initially scheduled to take place on April the 11th, but then postponed to July the 11th due to the coronavirus pandemic. It was postponed once again as the pandemic has continued to play out from July 11th to October the 24th. Okay, there we see both combatants. We saw Joyce just this weekend gone. We'll talk about that if any of you saw that fight, but definitely got a few things to say on that fight. But anyway, before that fight can take place, both boxers had to win tune-up fights to shake off the ring rust. This past Saturday, Joyce did his part by stopping Michael Wallish in 3 rounds. Now Dubois is set to take on undefeated Eric Pfeiffer on August the 29th. Oh, that's interesting. That's interesting. I didn't know there was so much of a big time gap. I'd assumed Dubois was going next week. Okay, so it's August the 29th. Okay, so be it. Okay, the October date will depend on the restrictions in terms of the amount of fans that are capable of attending the event. If the amount is small, then Warren will postpone the fight to a later date. Damn. You may get 3,000 people in a 20,000-seat arena, but that's going to look awful. You're not going to be allowed to sit next to each other. You got to spread them all around the arena. 1 meter distance around you, and you're sitting in a seat, and it's not just either side of you. It's in front, it's behind you, so that means only 20% of the seats can be sold, Warren said to Talk Sport. I want to fill it. I've got no idea how many would be allowed in, but I've got to be honest with you. If it's something like 20%, then we'll postpone it again. We've got to have a live audience. That gets a bit more out of the guys. You've got to... if you've got a competitive fight like with Daniel and Joe, you want the crowd cheering their man on. Fight Doctor, I'm going to go to you first. Actually, I'm just going to say this first. What Frank Warren is saying about you've got to have the crowd for the fighters, the UFC fights. I don't know if you guys watch UFC, but the UFC fights have disproved that theory. Because you've been having some great UFC cards recently, in lockdown down there in, Abu Dhabi Fight Island, UFC Fight Island, and we've seen some absolutely cracking fights. Saw a great fight just this weekend, gone Darren Till versus Whittaker of New Zealand, the Australian New Zealander. Say that again.
That whole card was good.
The whole card was good. It was a great card. It was a very enjoyable card from top to bottom. I mean, it was a brilliant card. I'll say, it goes far as say brilliant. That was fought behind closed doors.
They even had like an old man legends fight with Shogun and Minotaur. Not Minotaur, but Nogueira,
yeah. So the UFC fights have disproved the theory that you can't have great fights. We've had some great fights in the UFC, and I don't see why it should be any different for boxing. How would Frank know? He's never been through this before. Nobody's been through this before. So how can you say you can't have a great fight behind closed doors? You can't say that. There's no evidence to suggest that. In fact, there is evidence to suggest the contrary. So I think it's really down to the money. Stick to the money, Frank. You're right on the money side. Just stick to the money side, because that's what it's all about. It's the money, and I understand. I totally understand. So the Fight Doctor, your observations on that?
Real quick, have you ever watched like National Geographic or like some nature channel where they're showing the underwater divers and they're showing like this shark or this really big like carnivorous fish, and you look underneath the belly of this fish, and it has these little smaller fish that attach themselves and like attach themselves to the bottom of this big carnivorous fish, and they just ride around the bottom, sucking whatever it is that they can from the bottom of this fish that does all the work and does all the hunting, and well, that's a promoter. Okay, that's your typical promoter, right?
Yeah.
The fighter does all the work. The fighter does 90% of the work, really. The fighter does all the heavy lifting, the important work, right? And the promoter essentially is the little tiny fish that attaches himself to the bottom and rides out the boxer until he's no good. And once the boxer is no good and can no longer provide, he disassociates himself from that fighter and finds another one to latch onto.
Yes.
With no regard whatsoever for the fighter's safety, well-being, or what's in his or her best interest. Just all out for himself. That's Frank Warren.
Yes.
On the tree of life, the promoter is below an earthworm. Okay? All right? He's below an earthworm. You know. Of course, there's money to be made. Okay? The UFC has already proven this. I mean, they're doing pay-per-views like at least one a month.
They are.
You know, they're doing cards like damn near every weekend. Damn near.
They are. Pretty much every weekend for a time being, yeah.
Yeah, so they're doing cards every weekend. They're doing pay-per-views at least one a month. Like, since this whole COVID-19 businesses has jumped off, I've bought like at least 2, possibly even 3 UFC pay-per-view cards. I'm not even a UFC guy. Okay, so that should tell you something.
Yeah.
So for Frank Warren to let that nonsense come out of his mouth, basically lets you know exactly where he's coming from. All right, and where he's coming from, it's a hole in the ground with a manhole cover. Right, that's where he's coming from, because he's full of horse hockey. He's full of manure. That doesn't make any sense. I mean, that makes no sense. All right. Now, if his argument is there isn't as much money to be made, then sure, that's a given. But if his argument is there isn't enough money to be made, then I suspect that what he really means is there isn't enough money for me to make.
Yeah.
That's what that means. Okay.
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally. Jay, blues, and boxing.
To add on to what the fight doctor was talking about, promoters, man. If you ever want to see the true soul of a promoter, if you ever want to see the hologram start to fail and his true demon come out, like there's a press conference it was Chisora versus I can't remember, man. It was a press conference where Chisora it was almost like someone told him he was the main event, and then he got up there and he was the co, and he started hijacking the shit, shutting it down. He's like, "I want more money, David. I want more money."
It was,
dude,
what was it? I remember the one. It was when Pro Grays and Josh Taylor were headlining the card, and
the little guys.
Yeah, the little guys, Pro Grays and Josh Taylor. And I can't remember who. Oh, he was fighting. Was he? Who the hell was he fighting? It wasn't Takam. It could have been Takam. Was it Takam? I can't remember. But yeah, I remember that incident. He made a scene at the press conference, and they raised his money because Eddie Hearn knew that by that scene, by causing that scene, Chisora had raised the profile of the fights, and he still didn't get the main billing, but he made a compelling point that he should have been main billing. People are coming to see me more so than the little guys, and it's in my backyard. It's London. I'm a Londoner. And he made some compelling arguments. He didn't get the top billing, but he did get a raise.
There's a moment, right, where it pans over to the promoter for the other dudes on the other side of the stage, and they have Eddie Hearn.
Soderland. Yeah, Eddie Hearn and Soderland.
Just at one point, dude, all their eyes are so evil. Like you see the true snake that the promoters are. But for real, UFC, how many title fights have they put on since this started, man? They put on some major fights. Gaethje versus Ferguson.
Yes. And
a
they had
whole lot of fights, man.
Volkanov versus Kakui, El Kakui. Volkanov, the little Australian guy, versus
Holloway.
Holloway. El Kakui. I think they call him El Kakui as well. Yeah.
No, that's Ferguson.
Oh, that's Ferguson. Oh, yeah. My bad. Yeah.
No, you could. It's just selfish though, because they can put on huge boxing fights. They just don't want to. They're choosing to withhold the best fights and give you scraps. Really, I mean, seeing Virgil Ortiz the other night was good, but who was he fighting, man? Like it was all him the whole way.
It was all him. The fight doctor. You got any final words on this before we move along?
Yeah, no, just like I said, earthworms, leeches, the fish that attach themselves to the bigger fish that are doing all the real work. I'm just not a fan of any promoter in boxing. None of them. The way that they have done fighters traditionally has been criminal.
Absolutement.